A short story written by Chloe Covington. It was Friday, and I was in L.A. Admittedly, I was nervous. There were so many precautions I had to take in hopes of getting away with this. I'd never driven from the East Coast to the West before, and it was awful. I couldn't fly. Purchasing a ticket in my name would be a red flag for authorities. I couldn't use my credit card to check into any hotels along the way. Thankfully, I'd met a man who was all too happy to help. He'd been burned by Russell and had been looking for his own revenge for 10 long years. It was risky, getting as many people as I had involved. There were two who'd gone ahead to L.A. a week ago. They followed Russell, got his routine down, and sent updates to my New York accomplice. Mitch Simmons invested in a business of Russell's, but didn't read through the contract before signing. Why would he? My father was a well-known entrepreneur and stockbroker. Of course he knew how to run a successful business and make his partners rich. I never knew the specifics, and Mitch didn't care to tell me exactly what happened. All that mattered was he lost everything and had to work twice as hard just to scrape by. In his new line of work, Mitch met some interesting people who he introduced to me not long after I moved to Boston. They were part of an international crime syndicate. Murder was one of the many things they did well. I couldn't take money from any account, but Mitch convinced his thuggish friends that I was good for payment in the form of properties and cars. They had some devious attorneys working for them that would be able to cover my tracks. I hoped so, anyway. This was so incredibly risky. At present, there were at least 7 people involved. 2 attorneys, 2 goons in L.A., Olivia, a Chloe impersonator, and Mitch. I had to trust people I didn't know, 4 of which I'd never even met. Mitch handled all of the arrangements, including finding a woman who looked remarkably like me to stay in New York. I gave her my ID and my credit cards. Her and Olivia would be out and about, going to the movies and dinner, and the Chloe look-alike would use my credit cards to pay for everything, proving that I was, in fact, in New York when my father died. It was 4,000 miles from New York to L.A. Mitch and I left at 1 in the morning on Wednesday. We drove more than halfway, stopping only for gas, once in Colorado to get some sleep at a motel. Mitch checked in and brought me in through the back so that there would be 0 security footage of me. Not that that was entirely necessary. The police surely wouldn't be looking at cameras in some small western Colorado town. Finally, in L.A., I sat on the edge of the bed in the shadiest motel I'd ever been in. The carpet looked like it was the original from when the motel was built back in the 70s. Puke green shag carpet that I suspected some faint odor came from. It was a mixture of stale cigarettes, smoke, and rotting food. The walls at one time were white, but now were stained by smoke and years of neglect. The drapes were also some dingy color, looked like they'd never been washed. It was disgusting. At 10:30, there was a knock on the door, and Mitch opened it. The men who'd been staying in L.A. following Russell came in. They looked nothing like I thought they would. Hollywood had a way of setting up an ideal for what a criminal should look like. You know, heavily tattooed, dark and brooding, tattered wife beaters, low-hanging jeans. The men who came in the room had tattoos, but they weren't covered. They also wore slacks, button-down shirts, and shiny shoes. Had I seen them on the streets, I wouldn't have looked twice. They just looked so normal. There were no introductions. It was better that I didn't know their names. It was bad enough I saw their faces, and they saw mine. We went down the back stairwell and out to the Blue Navigator. The whole ride over to the Montage was silent. No one asked if I was sure this was what I wanted, or tried to talk me out of it. They were prepared to go through with it. I had to be too. On the way over, the 2 men who'd come to pick us up changed into Montage security uniforms. Mitch was dressed in a suit and I a red dress with a black wig. I had huge sunglasses that covered most of my face. In L.A., sunglasses at night were not uncommon thanks to celebrities. We were going in under the guise that Mitch and I were French dignitaries. As we walked in, my heart beat against my ribs. Mitch kept me close the whole way and spoke French and broken English as he checked us in, with false identification, of course. The other two passed us in the lobby and headed up the service elevator to Russell's floor. Our elevator ride up was silent, and after we got into our room, I let out a breath. I hadn't known I'd even been holding my breath. I leaned against the door and tried to get my breathing steadied. Mitch saw my distress and stood in front of me, rubbing my shoulders as he looked into my eyes. "Chloe, you aren't the one pulling the trigger. Just remember that. This needs to be done, or he will go on hurting and killing people. What he did to Jackson alone makes this necessary. He will never let you be happy." His horrifyingly truthful speech resonated deeply, and I nodded, took 2 deep breaths, and steadied myself. It was time to end his existence. For 2 minutes, at exactly 11:20, the security cameras on that floor would malfunction. Mitch and I watched the clock, and as soon as the digital readout changed, we walked out the door. He had a master key and was able to let himself into Russell's room. My father was in the shower, and the moment he walked through that door, one of the men who'd come along would shoot him. I watched as the man screwed on the silencer with the calm and collected demeanor of someone buttoning their shirt. His face showed no emotion. It was clear to me he'd done this many, many times before. Terrifying as that was, I turned my gaze to the door and waited. The water turned off, and a few moments later Russell came out, a towel wrapped around his waist. The moment he saw me alongside Mitch and a man with a gun pointed at his face, he did something I didn't expect. He smiled. Russell fully expected me to retaliate, and the look on his face said he was proud. Fucking proud. Before I could say anything, I heard a soft pop and saw Russell's head jerk back as blood splattered all over the formerly pristine white walls and marble floor in the bathroom. He fell back and hit the floor with a thud. Morbid curiosity got the best of me, and I took a few steps so I could see that he was actually dead. The huge caliber bullet they'd used blew a hole through the back of his head. There was brain matter mixed with the pool of blood that surrounded him. His eyes were glazed over. His chest did not rise with breath. Russell was dead.